Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another live show where I answer your automotive questions and sometimes butcher your names. Apologies for that in advance. A few things about the show before I get started. First of all, if you're watching this on YouTube, I cannot see your comments that are posted there. So I will not be answering your questions posted to the YouTube video. Apologies for that. In addition, once the Google Plus event concludes at 7:30-ish, sometimes I run long, I will not be answering any more questions posted to the event. So once we're done, we're done. That said, the next show will be, it looks like, April 29th. So if I miss you this time, you can always stop back on the 29th. In fact, I will post the event probably on the 24th, and you can start asking your questions all the way up until that day. You are not without hope, because 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and just about whenever, you can visit EricTheCarGuy.com. There's all kinds of stuff there to help you with your automotive issues, including an FAQ page, which I've spent a lot of time and effort trying to create comprehensive information, all sectioned out by category that can easily answer your questions. So if I don't help you here, try EricTheCarGuy.com. In fact, we have a forum there, and I just might answer your question over there. But we actually have quite a few questions posted this evening, so thank you for that. So we've got plenty of stuff to cover. In fact, there's one in particular that I was just reading a moment ago, which I'd like to actually start off with. Forgive me, give me a moment here. I'm trying to pull it up. Come on, I know you're there. I just read it. Here he is. And this is from Bruce Pierce. Hey, 1996 Honda Civic LX 1.6 non-VTEC. Car got some water damage. The car started to run bad, and I scanned for codes and got a crankshaft sensor code. I knew the crankshaft sensor was in a dizzy. I followed the diagnostic flowchart and found the dizzy checked out okay. Following the steps in the flowchart, it said to check the ECM connectors. One of the connectors nearest the floor was hard to disconnect from the ECM. I found it to have corrosion. Not knowing if the corrosion had made it into the ECM, I elected to throw another ECM. That fixed that problem, but now I have a P1399 pending code. The car has 215,000 miles on it, and I am trying to get it a few more miles out of it before I look for a replacement vehicle. The car burns about half a quart of oil a week and has since I owned it. Any ideas about the P1399? Okay, now this is something I believe I do know something about. Your P1399, I believe, is something for a blocked EGR passage. I know for a fact that the two engines, whether it be a manual transmission or automatic transmissions, are different. And the differences are the automatic has an EGR and the manual does not. So if you've got an ECU out of a vehicle that had an automatic transmission and your car's a manual transmission, that could be the reason for the code, and it's never going to go away. In fact, with water damage, I actually often find the exact thing that you're talking about because it's right there on the passenger floorboard and it can easily get wet. So for that particular one, I don't think there's anything you can do. Aside from that, come on, if you're burning a half a quart of oil a week, I don't think that engine is going to be long for this world. And let's keep putting oil in it, because it sounds like it's part of its fuel system now. But that being said, I mean, nurse it along as far as you can. But as far as the code, ignore it, because I don't think there's going to be anything you're going to be able to do about it. All right, Zaid Abazir, sorry. What happens if the engine gets filled with a little extra or a little less oil? And please give a rough estimate of the safe amount of being overfilled or underfilled, like 0.01 liters of oil, more or less. Okay, I'm not going to be able to give you something specific because it's going to be different for every engine. The dangers of overfilling and underfilling your engine, I'll just briefly cover that. Now, if you underfill your engine, obviously the engine gets starved for oil, so it's unable to lubricate the moving parts inside of it. Therefore, it heats up and possibly causes damage to bearings, possibly the engine. Those failures can get catastrophic if the oil gets low enough and has been run low enough for time. As far as overfilling, this is tricky because you can overfill it a little bit, but if you get it too far, some engines, you can actually fill the oil level up high enough to where it can come in contact with the weights of the crankshaft as they're rotating inside the engine. Some of them have what's called a windage tray underneath the crankshaft, and this helps. This helps with some of this. It also, there's other reasons for having a windage tray. However, you can fill it up past that windage tray and it can still come in contact with the oil level. And if that happens, the oil gets aerated. It gets whipped up kind of like a meringue. And that aerated oil, or that air-filled oil traveling through the engine, has the same effect as having no oil, because the oil, and I've done a video about this, is basically the metal parts inside the bottom end of your engine are never technically supposed to touch. There's a thin film of oil between those metal parts. And the reason for this is because liquids are not compressible. So if you try to squeeze a liquid, it's not going to happen. However, air is very compressible. If you've got air mixed in with that oil, the air can compress and the oil won't be able to do its job. And I hope I've done an adequate explanation of explaining that. But the idea is that you want to try to nail the oil level as much as you possibly can. As far as how much or how little, over or under, it's dependent upon the engine. Another thing, another takeaway from this is that when you're checking the oil level, make sure the vehicle is on a level surface, because if it's not, that oil level, well, that reading is going to be skewed, because the liquid will basically go against gravity. So if it's tilted up one way or the other, you're not going to get an accurate reading. So it's difficult to answer your question specifically if you're over by this much or under by this much. And you also have to consider cornering forces, because as you go around a corner, that oil is going to slosh around inside the sump, and all kinds of things could happen. So that's a difficult question to answer exactly, but I hope I've explained the dangers of above and below the fill mark. All right, difficult karma. Now that's a name I can relate to. Oh, and if you're wondering about my shirt, yes, I dug this one up from the archives. I've had it for a very long time. But yeah, I mean, come on, who doesn't have a Rat Fink shirt? All right, difficult karma, turbocharger versus supercharger, and twin turbo versus twin charger. Also, do you think remapping a car would be worth it? All right, now this could get into a long, protracted discussion. However, I'm going to simplify it down. All right, turbochargers, they work off of the exhaust leaving the engine. So as the exhaust leaves the engine, it spins basically a fan that spins another fan that helps compress air and put it into the engine. That's the really simplified way of saying it. So as the exhaust leaves, it spins a fan that in turn is connected to another fan that spins up another spool fan on the other side that basically forces air into the intake of the engine. What this does, a naturally aspirated engine, which an engine without a turbocharger, supercharger, or anything, is dependent upon atmospheric pressure. So whatever pressure is around you on the outside, that is what the engine will be able to draw in. When you supercharge or turbocharge, you force extra air into the engine. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, the more air you have in the engine, the more fuel you can mix with it, and you can get more power out of that charge. So more air fuel equals more power. Simple way to put it. So turbochargers and superchargers do the exact same thing. A supercharger, however, is spun off the front of the engine, or off the crankshaft of the engine, let's say. And it pretty much compresses air. It sits on the top, well, sometimes on the front of the engine. But anyway, it's connected to the crankshaft. The differences between these two methods of supercharging or turbocharging the engine: with turbocharging, you have to have exhaust flow. And the more exhaust flow you have, the more air you can compress going in. So traditionally, turbochargers give you more power after the exhaust is moving, so past the line. Whereas with a supercharger, that power is available immediately. As soon as the crankshaft starts turning, it's spinning the turbo or the supercharger. So therefore, that power is more of an immediate delivery. So it's great for the bottom end. Turbocharging, nicer for the top end. Supercharging, nicer for the bottom end. As far as twin turbos or twin superchargers, okay, I'm trying to wrap my mind around having twin superchargers. I don't think I've seen that. Not to say that it doesn't exist, because it seems like everything's been done at this point. That said, either way, you are cramming more air into the engine. Superchargers give it to you at the bottom end. Turbochargers give it to you traditionally up higher. Both of those things can be manipulated and adjusted. As far as your remapping, now that has to come into play if you're going to turbocharge or supercharge a modern vehicle or just a fuel-injected vehicle. It's going to have to know that you added more air, because otherwise it's going to run lean. Remapping is necessary if you're going to modify a stock engine with a supercharger or a turbocharger. Now, as far as remapping your engine just in general, there's a trade-off. There's always a trade-off in physics. If you want to go faster, you have to give something up. And the first thing to usually go is fuel economy. So yeah, you can add more fuel and get more power out of your engine, change your shift points and all that kind of thing, but your fuel economy is going to go. Engineers, when they design these vehicles, they design them to have the best of all worlds, the most power, the best fuel economy, blah, 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 all the way down. They're trying to make everybody happy. So in many cases, there is room for improvement there. So depending upon how you want to drive your vehicle, you can, quote unquote, remap some vehicles. Some, it's not possible. So you have to change out the computer and then use it as a standalone thing and then program it to basically do what you need it to do. Like I said, there's a long discussion here. I'm not going to get into it actually any further, but I hope that gives you some general idea of what those things are. But there's plenty of information out there about this kind of stuff, videos too, that you can check out and learn more about forced induction. Anyway, moving on. We got Hernan. I don't know what the accent. Hernan D. Reyes. I have an 88 Nissan pickup, 2.7 diesel engine, rebuilt 2 years ago. Last year, we adapted an AC system, and since it didn't come with one, is it normal for it to overheat when I'm on the road going uphill and AC on? Well, if you are modifying a vehicle by putting an AC system on it that doesn't have AC, then you're going to have to upgrade the cooling system in some way, shape, or form. Reason being, AC isn't blowing cold air. What it's doing is it's removing the warm air from inside the passenger compartment and placing it outside in that condenser, which is usually mounted in front of the radiator. So you're taking all your hot air from inside the vehicle, transferring it out to in front of the radiator. In doing so, you're creating an extra heat load in front of the radiator. That's the reason why, most vehicles that are equipped with AC, when you turn the AC on, cooling fans come on immediately. Doesn't matter if the car is warmed up or not. They automatically turn on because it's part of the self-preservation of the vehicle. In your case, I'm not really sure, but if it's going to be a larger radiator, a bigger fan, if you don't have a fan shroud on there, put a fan shroud on there because that really helps with the efficiency with the airflow through the radiator. But you may have to upgrade to a larger radiator. You may consider mounting an electric fan, perhaps in front of the condenser, where when you turn the AC on, that cooling fan activates as well, and that's constantly running, and that may help the problem also. But really, you're going to have to upgrade your cooling system to deal with the increased heat load of the air conditioning system that you have installed. Good luck. Next, Yuri, yes. I mean, come on. I'm sorry. Yatsishin. Anyway, I want to do some autocross, but I worry that it might significantly damage vehicle. Will autocross do big damage to the engine and manual transmission on an 07 Civic Si? Great videos. Thank you. All right. Well, here's the rule in quote unquote racing. You can't beat cubic inches and you can't beat cubic money. And I want you to pay close attention to the second half of that statement, cubic money. There's a couple of reasons for that. Once you start racing, you're going to want to keep racing. That's kind of why racers reach out for sponsors, because you're always going to need money and you're never going to have enough. Why? Because you're always going to want to go faster and you're likely going to break things often. So if you take a stock car like a Civic like that and start ripping it around a track and pushing it to its limit, yes, things will break. Eventually they will break and you will need to fix them. So racing is an extreme condition and you have to take that into account. So you often purchase upgraded, stronger, better, faster parts to go on that vehicle. And as a result, well, you spend money, lots of it, cubic money. Good luck. Kevin Villegas. Hello, Eric. I have a 2009 Chevrolet Malibu with a 2.4 Ecotec engine over 130,000 miles. It runs and drives perfectly. I was cleaning my throttle assembly and noticed some kind of black grease inside the intake manifold. So I removed my throttle assembly to take a better look and found that the greasy pretty much all over the intake manifold. It's like the grease you would see in the valve cover gasket when it's leaking oil. My question is, if that grease oil is normal for an engine, or if I could have a problem later on regarding this grease. Thanks. That is perfectly normal. In fact, the reason for it is your Your combustion chamber isn't 100% sealed. It's sealed as good as it can be, and it does wear out over time. And what I'm talking about specifically is your piston rings and your cylinder walls. You got to think, those pistons are moving up and down very quickly and for a very long time, over hundreds of thousands of miles. They do this. And when you take metal parts and rub them together, they're going to wear out. The oil helps. Changing your oil helps extend the life of these things. But what happens is the stuff that happens inside the combustion chamber, combustion, it creates soot, it creates other gases. And those gases combine with the oil and create sometimes yucky chemicals. Outside of that, there is that bad air, if you will, inside the combustion chamber that's slipping past the pistons and down inside. And they have what's called the PCV, positive crankcase ventilation system, to deal with this. So in other words, it tries to suck out this bad air and actually run it back through the engine and burn it again, because that helps make cleaner air for the rest of us. That said, that what you're seeing is normal, and it's a result of that stuff. Now, it gets worse over time the more those rings wear out. So the more things wear out inside your engine, the more gunk you're going to see. Perfectly normal. I mean, you really can't fight entropy. Things wear out in the universe, and eventually they need to be replaced or rebuilt. But what you have is normal. I don't think you should be concerned about it. As I said, just change your oil on a regular basis. It really helps everything go so much longer. It helps the seals in your engine. It helps the metal parts last longer. So many things. Change your oil on a regular basis, and you should have an engine that lasts a good long time. But as far as that stuff, completely normal. You will see it on any engine that's been run for any amount of time, even brand new ones. Okay, Joseph Harmond, when setting timing on any vehicle at all, is there always a timing mark? Well, kind of glad you asked that question. And I'm going to say, if it's a vehicle that's older than, like, say, 2000, do not mess with the timing. In fact, most times you can't mess with the timing. They've taken that out of the equation. Part of the reason is as you adjust ignition timing, if you adjust it incorrectly, and the manufacturers know this, and they've tried to dial this in to help with emissions. You can really screw with emissions by messing with ignition timing. You can also possibly damage the engine if you don't do it correctly. People come to me all the time looking to time their engine. They're looking for something to tweak, something to adjust. New stuff, you can't do it. And it's a coil unplugged. There's not even a distributor on a lot of vehicles. So older vehicles, sure. Yeah, you can go in, you can set it, and you set it with the timing marks, but there aren't always timing marks, no. I know some GM engines didn't have timing marks, or even some that were difficult to access, like, say, in Vance. So even back in the day, so to speak, you couldn't have access. You couldn't get a timing light down in there to even see the crankshaft or anything. So you had to use other methods. In fact, they came up with all kinds of special tools to do that. But lately, it's just not part of the equation. And I've often said, don't mess with ignition timing. If you're looking to get performance, something like, don't mess with ignition time. If you've had like a distributor out and you need to retime the engine that way, that's fine. But for the most part, leave the timing alone, because even with adjustable timing on later model vehicles, the computer is still got its hand in there reaching around trying to adjust it. So don't mess with it. That's what I would recommend. Let's see, Sharky 626. I even mess up the easy ones. Hello, Eric. Been a happy subscriber since early 2013. I have a 2001 Mazda 626 2.5 liter. Funny, I was just working on an 98 yesterday. Over 81,000 miles. Had the fuel pump replaced a month ago by a service place, and noticed that I am having an occasional problem after that, which I am going to call crank delayed start. Let me give you the scenarios I'm aware of. If I start the car the next day after it has been sitting in the garage overnight, cranks and starts right up. If I drive, then park the car for maybe 5 minutes and come back, cranks and starts right up. But if I park the car and it sits for maybe half an hour to an hour, like if I'm out to eat, the engine will sometimes crank for a good 3 to 5 seconds before it finally revs up. To me, it seems like a fuel delivery problem. I'm thinking that it might be a fuel pressure regulator, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on it first before I start diagnosing it further. Thanks a lot for any help you can give. Okay, Sharky, well, all right. So you're probably correct in the sense that it's possibly a fuel delivery problem. However, if it was a fuel pressure regulator problem, it would manifest, I would think, all the time. Fuel pressure regulator is a mechanical device. So in other words, it wouldn't necessarily start right up in the morning. It wouldn't necessarily start right up after 5 minutes. So it doesn't stand to reason that you would have a mechanical failure with something like a fuel pressure regulator and have it start fine other times, and just specifically at random times, like if it sits for an hour. That sounds to me more like maybe a coolant temperature sensor that may not be reading correctly, either due to a faulty sensor or an older sensor, or perhaps there could be like air in the cooling system. Something simple as that. So the coolant temperature sensor may not be getting an accurate reading because it's not submerged in coolant, or it may be starting to get old and not giving accurate readings as far as what the engine temperature actually is. The coolant temperature sensor acts like the choke, the old style choke on a carburetor. Not that some of you even know what that is, but anyway, it lets the computer know what temperature the engine's at. So if it's cold, it's going to add more fuel. If it's warm, it's not going to add as much fuel because it knows everything's all warm. But when it's cold, you're going to need more fuel to get it started up and get it running. So all that stuff in between is part of the fuel mapping. They sat down and they figured out, hey, when it's this temperature, we're going to add this much fuel. Check to see if you got any codes. Check to see what the engine temperature readings are. If you can, a good scan tool tells you these types of things. And these days they have them that, you know, just a little module you plug in your OBD2 connector and you look at it on your smartphone. Everybody tells me Torque app. There's also other products out there available. In fact, I've reviewed a couple of them that give you a lot of really good information for a nominal price. So for somebody that's not doing it every day, I think that's a good option. But as far as if you suspect a fuel delivery problem, the way to diagnose that is with a fuel pressure gauge. So you check the actual fuel pressure. In fact, I've done a video about this. I'll post a link down in the description to that when everything's all said and done. But yeah, if you suspect a fuel delivery issue, check the fuel pressure and see if you've got the proper fuel pressure at the proper time. And if not, then you go to it from there. But outside of that, you have no hard evidence to me that says there's something going on. Because usually if it's a problem with a fuel pump, you'll have it like first thing in the morning. Like when you first go to start it up, it'll take 3 to 5 seconds to start. And that could be an issue with the check valve in the fuel pump. I've done a video about that also. In fact, I talk about that in that fuel pressure video and how to check for it. Outside of that, that's about as far as I can go with this one, because I realized, wow, we're really burning through the time on today's show, and I want to try to get to some more questions. So I'm going to be moving on now, but good luck with that. All right. Andre Yonadam. Hey, Eric, I love your show. I've been watching it a long time. I've always had a question and decided to ask you. I drive a 2014 CRV, and sometimes when I put it in park, even on the slightest slope where the street isn't even, the car rolls just a little bit. And when you put it in drive, I hear a loud thump. This happens almost whenever parking isn't perfectly leveled. The thing is, other cars don't have this issue. Is there an issue with my car? Thanks. Andre, I hate to break it to you, but it's an issue with you, not your car. And the issue is you're not using your parking brake. Anytime you park your vehicle, especially when it's on a hill, use your parking brake for a couple of reasons. One, the only thing holding your vehicle in place, and I'll post a link in the description to my automatic transmission dissection, you can see, but it's not much bigger than my pinky that's holding the entire weight of that vehicle in place. And there's a cog that little lever fits into whenever you put it into park, and that's probably the noise that you're hearing. It's rolling back until that cog seats in with that lever, and once it does, you're quote unquote in park. When you go to take it out of park, that cog is wedged in there, and when you go to try to move, it takes a minute to pull out because it's under stress, because the wheels and everything are putting stress on this very tiny cog inside the automatic transmission. If you use your parking brake, you don't roll back. Also, it helps preserve your rear brakes, which are normally associated with a parking brakes almost always go to rear brakes. Not using your parking brake causes it to rust into place, causes it not to work when you need it. So use your parking brake. And also, there's many times a self-adjusting mechanism that may go along with that. It may not be the case on yours, but there's a self-adjusting mechanism that goes along with the parking brake. In some vehicles, the brake adjustment is using the parking brake. So every time you use the parking brake, if there's a little bit of adjustment there, it automatically adjusts just because you used your parking brake. So the moral of the story, the summary here, use your parking brake. But no, there's nothing wrong with your car. All right. Okay, Damian King. Hey, Eric, I have a 2001 Nissan Sentra. Bought it from a used car dealer 3 years ago. Last year, I did a tune-up, and while replacing one of the spark plugs, I noticed that the previous owner had cross-threaded the cylinder 4 plug. After about 45 minutes of fighting to get the plug out, I figured I would be able to put the new one in and just chase the threads using a new plug by turning it back and forth as I put it in the plug well. Once I got the plug about halfway, it wouldn't hardly budge. So with this being my only vehicle at the time and with no budget or resources, I forced it the rest of the way, and now I believe it's causing a misfire. Can you give me any tips on how to solve this issue? Damien, I've had the exact same problem, and it's not that somebody cross-threaded the spark plug. Sometimes what happens, in this, like when you remove spark plugs, it's really best to do it when the engine is cold. If you do it when it's hot, sometimes there's issues, especially when you have aluminum cylinder heads. The spark plugs, the threads on them sometimes get wedged up inside the aluminum cylinder head, just like what you're talking about. I've experienced the exact same thing on more than one occasion. And as I said, it may not be the person that was there before you. It may just be something that happened, because it just does happen sometimes. And in my case, I ended up replacing the engine. And the reason being is because I didn't chase the threads. I put it what's called a helicoil. So in other words, I made the hole larger and I put in a new set of threads inside of that same hole. And I ran the car for several years after that, after installing the thread insert for the spark plug. However, every time I went to change the plugs, the thread insert would come out with the spark plug. And this happened one time too many. And I'd finished replacing the spark plugs and I revved the engine up. And the spark plug shot right out of the engine, hit the bottom of the hood. It made a loud noise after that. The reason I replaced the engine is because at the time it had over 300,000 miles on it. And I figured, well, I know I need a new cylinder head, or at least some work on the cylinder head. So I ended up replacing the engine. What you have there is damage to the cylinder head. You could possibly use a thread insert like I had. Because those spark plugs are down inside a recessed hole, I had to make a special tool. I actually welded an old socket to the rethreading tool to get it down into that spark plug well. It's not a fun situation that you're in, and I'm sorry that you're in that situation, but it's probably going to involve rethreading. And I'm going to say that in your case, based on that situation, I would take it to a professional and have them repair it. I would save up the money and have them do it, because if you mess it up, you're going to be buying a cylinder head or taking it to a machine shop or something. That cylinder head's going to come off no matter what. So you're kind of stuck. It's unfortunate. But perhaps, like I said, find the right shop, tell them about your situation. Perhaps they've run into it before. And like I said, maybe they can install a rethread in there and that could get you by for a while. For me, it was a while. It was a couple of years that I got out of that engine after the fact. But in the end, it didn't work. So I wish you the best with that situation. We'll keep going here. We may run late today. So what? We got Alexander Dimitrov. Hey, Eric, I apologize for the bad English. I'm from Bulgaria. It will be 2 a.m. when your show is being broadcast. Well, thanks for staying up if you made it. I hope you'll be able to answer my questions. I have a 1998 Lexus GS 300, 222 horsepower, 5-speed automatic, 150,000 miles, original gearbox. I have a switch called the ECT, which has 2 positions. Neutral, snow, and power. For power, I guess. Snow mode works fine and the light comes on when I switch it to it, but power mode doesn't work. No light comes on in the dash at all. It should be a green light, and it's supposed to let me know it is supposed to let me use the full range of RPM when I press the gas pedal, which is a setting for normal driving. Overall, the gearbox shifts perfectly. Do you have any ideas? Could it just be the switch, or is it something else? I have an appointment in Toyota, but it's after a month. They suggested it might be some kind of valve not working, but it seems strange because the gearbox shifts very smoothly and it's quite responsive. So I'd be glad if you give your opinion. Best regards, Alex. Okay. Stuff like that. I think you're right to take it to the Toyota dealer, because things of that vintage, I don't believe, well, I don't know if newer scan tools have the ability to access that information. And this is how I would approach it if it came into my shop. I'd plug in the scan tool and I'd work the switch and see if that input is being registered by the computer. If it wasn't being registered by the computer, then yeah, I'd say maybe a switch problem or the wires going to it or a connector or something of that nature. Given that it works in other modes, it's hard to say that the switch is actually bad. It could be, like Toyota suggesting, something on the other end there, a valve that's not actuating, that's supposed to allow that full RPM range. I don't know exactly how that system works, but I assume it involves more than just the transmission. I'm sure that it involves the engine and changes those parameters. In addition, changes shift points like you're suggesting. But to be honest, you need more information before I can give any input on this. Mostly I need to know more about how the system works, specifically how the system works. And I have a really good scan tool that can help me out with that. But I wish you the best. And honestly, I think you're right to go to the Toyota dealer. But as far as my opinion on it, it's really difficult to say. Okay, we have a Struglav reputation. Another one I can finally wrap my lips around. No, that didn't come out right. Anyway, hey, I got my first car, a 1993 Honda Accord. I've noticed today that my cluster is reading wrong information. The gas is supposed to be half and the speedometer jumps to 20 and then goes to 10 and then stops there. For a while, my RPM meter bounces at 2 RPM. I haven't started the car yet, but these things happen on my cluster. I noticed this happening when I was cleaning the throttle body, because I just bought it secondhand and took off my positive terminal on my battery. When I was done, I went to turn over my car, swung the key 3 times, and remember it was off the battery. When I put it back on is when I noticed the problem. I also noticed that there was spark in my starter motor. Could that be the problem? Why my cluster is reading wrong? I took it out already and nothing was burnt or jamming in the needles, or everything looked fine. Can you please help me? What this car to be the best, being that it's my first car and I've always wanted one. Thanks a bunch. Oh, it's from the Caribbean. Fan of all your videos. Well, I'll move there and fix your car for you. Anyway, that's a tough one, because it sounds like you've done some stuff, and it sounds like it was fine before you did the stuff you did. It's a 93, so it's certainly not new. I'm thinking the first thing that comes to mind is maybe battery voltage issue. Low battery voltage does weird stuff, like all kinds of weird stuff, and you've got several weird things happening at once. You might load test the battery and see if the battery is okay, and also those connections. You disconnected it and reconnected. It's very important for those connections to be clean and tight. Other than that, I wouldn't have recommended taking the cluster out, even though you've already done that. I would, like I say, I would turn my attention to something general like the battery to start with. This is kind of, I'm kind of reaching here. I don't quite have enough information to give you a good answer on this, and I apologize for that. Other than start with the battery and its connections and see what you can figure out from there. Okay. Oh, Leanne. Yeah, I know it's Leanne, because it's a 1997 Saturn SE2, 193,000 miles. I recently had DTCs for misfire number 4 cylinder, O2 heater circuit malfunction, and EGR pintle carbon buildup, if memory serves. I replaced the downstream O2 sensor, and the misfire and EGR codes disappeared. They are not showing as stored codes on the pocket scanner. I bought the EGR gasket because I was going to remove the EGR to clean the carbon residue out. However, with the EGR code gone, I'm wondering if that was true EGR code or if it's just an artifact from and or O2 sensor codes. Any comments or suggestions? Thank you. You may very well be on the path with that, because many times the EGR is monitored by the O2 sensor. So the computer commands the EGR to come on, and the O2 monitors to see if there's a change in the exhaust stream or the exhaust content. And if it doesn't see that, it could set a code for an EGR. Now, if the O2 is malfunctioning and the computer is getting bad information from the O2, it assumes that the EGR is having a problem. So you may very well have just solved your own problem or said what it is, because if there's an O2 sensor malfunction, the computer is getting bad information. It doesn't know any better. It doesn't know that it's not the EGR's problem. It's a problem with the O2 sensor. So it's hard to say. But given that you replace the O2 sensor and it's better, I call that a win. Keep your EGR gasket for another day. Let's keep going. Let's see about someone who might have just asked a question. Oh, I'm almost to the top here. If I'm, no, got a ways to go. Oh, all right. Well, we'll try somebody who might have just posted. We'll give them a little surprise. Joseph Garlitz. If I said that wrong, sorry. Hey, Eric, how can I tell if a car has had the timing belt changed? Thanks for what you do. You've saved me hundreds of dollars. I have become a decent mechanic, not by choice. I'm a poor college student, and I like to save money anywhere I can. I can relate, my friend. In fact, that's kind of how I got started, too. I used to fix people's cars for pizza and beer many moons ago. Keep the videos coming. Appreciate it. So thanks for your comments. So how do you know when a timing belt's been changed? That's an excellent question. There's no way to really know that without actually putting your eyes on it and your hands on it. Sometimes they put stickers that say timing belt changed now. Sometimes I look at the drive belts because you have to often remove the drive belts in order to get to the timing belt. However, that I have seen cases where people have replaced the timing belt and not replaced the drive belts. And that was kind of getting the age of the drive belts could indicate the age of the timing belt, but that's a big could. And it's all a big could. So there really is no way to tell. The only way to know is to get in there and put your eyes on it. And if it's been long enough and you're not really sure, it's not going to hurt to replace it. But if nothing else, go in there and check the tension. If the tension is kind of loose, why not go for it? But yeah, honestly, I haven't found an accurate method of doing that other than physical examination. Yeah, well, let's do one more. Crazy Toolbox. Yay, names I can read. Hey, Eric, I have a Honda Accord. It has covered 5,000 miles a year. I bought it. Everything was in order, but that was driving 40 kilometers an hour. The sound is such that whoa, I'm missing something here. Hey, Eric, I have a Honda Accord. It has covered 5,000 miles a year. I bought it. I bought everything was in order, but I was driving 40 kilometers an hour and something broke. Something inside it broke, but would say that the ride 80 kilometers an hour, then the route disappears. I have watched many places I looked and did not see anything. That I hope you can pass me some advice what to look fault. Thanks. I'm just going to guess here. Maybe English is not your first language. Don't fault you for that. It's a crazy language to learn. I know. I spent years. I still haven't mastered it, as you can tell by me reading names here. I really don't have a clue. I'm struggling to try to figure out exactly what your problem is, and I apologize. Stop over to the forum. Maybe we can help you over there. But I'm lost on this one. Sorry. All right, let's see if we can get one I can actually sink my teeth into. Camille Darmoth. Hey, Eric, I've been watching your show for quite some time now. I learned a lot from you and still do. Love what you're doing and hope that in the future there will be a daily ETCG video. That would be great, but I would need a staff of people to do it because there's no way. But I can barely keep up with my workload now. Anyway, enough about me. Recently, I swapped my manual transmission with a used one in my 2003 Peugeot 206 and replaced the clutch. I feel that when the clutch makes contact, engages with the flywheel, it's kind of rough or simply not as smooth as it used to be unless I rev it up to about 2,000 RPM. What might be the problem? Okay, now I'm trying to wrap my mind around whether it's the clutch that you're feeling this with or the gear selection. That's important because when you replace the clutch, you're going to have to remove the transmission. You're going to have to disconnect all the shift linkage. It's possible if you're feeling it when you're trying to shift that the shift linkage isn't quite adjusted or connected properly, and that could be the cause of the issue that you're having. Same with the clutch. If the clutch wasn't quite installed correctly, that could also cause issue. What I do is I put a very slight amount of grease on the input shaft of the transmission so that the clutch can move really nice on there. I also lubricate the pivot points of the throwout bearing and sometimes the top of the throwout bearing to try to make sure everything can move freely. And it helps prevent some of the symptoms that you're talking about. Lastly, I'll add that it's often it's very important to use the correct fluid in your transmission. So if you're not using the recommended fluid for that transmission, it could contribute to shifting problems. And oftentimes you remove the fluid when you do a clutch replacement because the transmission's a lot lighter without the fluid in it. Well, it's lighter. So if you filled it up with different fluid that wasn't the correct fluid, that could also give you not a good shifting feel. I'm going to close it out here. We've added an extra 10 minutes to your show. Yay. Once again, if you're watching this on YouTube, I cannot see those comments. I won't be answering them. Apologies in advance for that. Also, if you're posting to the Google Plus event after it closes down, I'll not be answering that. Things that discussed and brought up and videos that I might have mentioned in this show, I'll put links to those in the description, but give me a little bit to get that together. I'm going to be basically on the computer for about a half hour or so afterwards, putting that stuff together for you. Once again, if I didn't get to your question, there's always EricTheCarGuy.com, so please visit me there. There's all kinds of things that can help you, including a forum where we can interact. And lastly, if you wish to connect with me socially, Google+, obviously, Facebook, Twitter, and now Instagram. And I close each of my videos with, yes, be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I will see you next time.